All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is Nitha Ramachandra from the NR Hour Sports Show. This is episode 1034. We are live on all podcast platforms, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Anchor, and all the podcast platforms. We are joined by a really special guest. Everybody knows her. Her name is Jade McCarthy. She used to work for ESPN. I consider the GOAT of ESPN, and she did a lot of amazing things with that crew. And man, she's one of the best, in my opinion, in women in sports. And now she's doing big things. After she left ESPN, she joined Sports Spectrum, and now she has her own podcast, which we'll talk about, called Transformed, which is amazing. I saw some of your episodes. You're killing it there. And also, she's part of the 33rd team with Mike Tannenbaum. They do a great job with that platform. But Jade, I just want to say thank you for joining the show. It's truly an honor. And like I said, you're one of the best in women in sports. You're the GOAT. And fans, please tune in. You can ask questions to Jade today in our Spreaker app. Fan interactions is always good on the show. But Jade, thank you again. How are you and your family doing?
Oh, we're great. I don't know if I can live up to that introduction, but I'll do my best. It is great to be here and spend some time chatting with you. And I know I'm in good company because you've had some great guests on this show. And credit to you and your team for all the work that you've done in building this and having this out there for people to listen to and to grab a hold of, and obviously much continued success with it.
Thank you, Jade. We're honored for you to look at our stuff. And like I said, you're the GOAT of ESPN. I don't know, we missed you when you left ESPN, but let's start off with like women in sports. When did you get interested in being in the sports industry? And who would you say that you looked up to while growing up?
I think for me, I grew up in a house where we were always watching sports. And my great aunt was a huge baseball fan. And she sort of, she would tell you with a twinkle in her eye that she begrudgingly became a Red Sox fan when the Boston Braves left town. So, I mean, this is going like way, way back, but she loved baseball. And I was with her so frequently on Saturdays all through my childhood. And more often than not, we would listen to games on the radio. I mean, like sometimes we would be inside and, she'd have like her little like antenna TV, like they don't even exist that way anymore. And we'd watch Red Sox games, but more frequently we'd have them on the radio. And, I joke with my kids now, I'm like, just close your eyes, like picture it, when we're like in the car and they're listening to it on the radio. And so I watched baseball from a really young age with her, watched a lot of football, hockey with my dad, hoops, golf, NASCAR. My dad liked NASCAR, which was, I grew up in the Boston area. I don't think you hear that every day coming from New England for sure. And when I sort of discovered TV and wanted to do something with writing and had a professor in college who just encouraged me towards television instead of print. And right from the get-go, I was like, well, I want to be the person who can ask the questions. And that was sort of how I discovered the idea of, being on air somewhere. And then I was always, I started out in news, but I was always in the sports department. Like I was always hanging out in the sports department because way back when, when people read the paper, I always read the sports page first. And so when I had an opportunity to get into the sports landscape as opposed to the news landscape, I jumped on it and no looking back from there.
Yeah. So tell us your first time where you got to cover games throughout your career, either in high school or college. Take us to that moment when you got the opportunity to cover games.
Yeah. So my first real sports job was in Philly. And I was 25 when I got the job there, and having grown up in Boston and having a sense of the type of sports city I was starting out in, I was nervous for sure, because the reality in a city like Philadelphia, and I don't have to tell you this, is if you don't know what you're talking about, they will run you out of town faster than you can even say it, But but I always loved sports, so I guess I wasn't overly concerned. I remember going on the job interview, and the news director at the time being like, "Well, do you think you can ask the tough questions in the locker room?" And I remember looking at him and going, "Well, if you can ask the tough questions in the mayor's office or of the senator or whatever, then I don't see any difference between asking the tough questions in the locker room." So my first day on the job in Philly was a Monday, and the Eagles were playing the Seahawks on Monday Night Football, and it was the day that Reggie White's number was retired at Lincoln Financial Field. So it was quite an introduction to the fans of Philadelphia and their passion and their love for football. And obviously, I was there at a time when the Eagles made some runs, the Flyers made some runs as well. I remember the drive from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh and Philadelphia to Pittsburgh and Philadelphia to Pittsburgh on repeat. And the Phillies, when I was there, won the World Championship and won the World Series. So that was obviously quite fun to see the growth and development of that team and the changes that came around with it. And then, to go on and see them win it all and cover the parade and all of that. I have great memories of games and times and really just huge moments in the city of Philadelphia, which was, like I said, my first real true sports job.
Wow. Yeah, so we are live with talented, inspiring sports reporter, broadcaster Jade McCarthy. We already have a fan question for you. So someone wants to know in our Spreaker app, they want to know, what did that mean to you when you won the Emmy Award?
Oh, the Emmys are they were really fun for me in Philly. And I think I won several of them when I was there. And one of the more meaningful ones for me was probably, I worked with a producer who was in Philly for a long time. And he and I created a series called Game Changers. And it was anybody who changed the way you look at sports. And so we would profile different people. Like I profiled Charlie Manuel after he led the Phillies to that World Series as the manager. And, I profiled Ryan Howard when he signed that new contract that was like, really a milestone one at that point in time in Major League Baseball. And then I profiled a young skier who had Paralympic dreams. And I profiled a dad who had a son who was special needs and discovered that his son would smile. He was nonverbal, and he discovered his son would smile and just be filled with joy when he would take him for runs in a stroller. And so he grew from there, and this father wound up competing in triathlons and doing every stage of it with his son in tow. So he would push him in a stroller for the for the running portion. He built something that he could pull with the bike, and a raft that he could swim with for the swim portion. And so he was someone who changed the way you looked at sport. And we won an Emmy for that series. And that was super meaningful for me just because I love to storytell, and I love being able to share the stories that make us care about sports. Like the things that you go, oh, that's why I want to root for that guy. Like that's why I'm cheering for her team or that coach. So I've always loved those stories. So to be able to win an Emmy Award for creating a series that focused on people and teams and stories like that was super meaningful. And if I were actually like in the office, I've had to hide today because of everything going on in my house right now, but I'm like hiding out in my closet. But if I were downstairs in the office, you would actually see the Emmy behind me because we have them, displayed down there because they are meaningful. You work hard for them, and it's nice to be able to share that. And now my kids are like, "What's that?"
Well, you deserve it, Jay, because you worked hard throughout your whole career, and like I said, you're amazing. So. But did you get to cover the Yankees Phillies World Series? I'm a Yankee fan, but did you get to cover that?
I did. Yeah, I did. So That one, I just, the thing that really stood out to me there was, and you were probably thrilled about it, but the Phillies bats just went so cold. I mean, they just like, they could not buy a hit in that series. And, and I always remember, Charlie Manuel, the manager of the Phillies at the time, his big thing was hitting's contagious, hitting's contagious. And it's so true. It was like they just couldn't get like one guy to like start to break through to wake up the rest of the bats and to get that domino effect going. It was just like, it was like watching a different team because they were just so cold. But as a Yankees fan, you were probably like, sweet, like this works for me.
So I think the biggest play was for us was when we were in Philly when Johnny Damon stole third. I think that was we had Johnny Damon on the show too, and we told him about he told us about that play, and so I think that was a game changer in that series.
Sure. As I mentioned before, I don't know how I feel about this now. I mean, I grew up as a Red Sox fan, and not only did Johnny Damon come on this show, but he also left Boston to go play for the Yankees. So this is a little painful right now. It's all good. It's all good. That's part of the fun of sports.
So for you being a Boston's fan, tell our fans, what would you say the atmosphere is like when you were covering the sports in Philly? Obviously, Philly fans could be crazy, but just describe the atmosphere for you being from Boston and obviously Philly being another high, like with the fans being crazy.
Yeah, I just think both cities are so passionate about their sports. And it's changed over the years for sure. I mean, when the Red Sox won it in 2004 and have obviously won it a lot since, it just Boston changed between that and obviously, the Patriots and all the Super Bowl wins there and, the Bruins, the Celtics, they've all gotten in on it. So it's very different than certainly when I was growing up in Boston and it was a lot of like, wait till next year, wait till next year, wait till next year. But both cities and having covered sports in both cities, I feel so fortunate because the fans are really engaged and involved. And I just think that's really special. And you certainly find some athletes who thrive under that and others who it's kind of not their jam. And, they might prefer to be in a little place that's maybe a little less intense because both places really are intense. I mean, but for me, like, I loved that. That's awesome to me. Like if you're working in a place where people expect you to be at your best and people expect you to be on it and engaged all the time, like what more can you ask for?
Yeah. So we have another fan question here. Someone wants to know, what would you say your most memorable interview you have done so far in your career?
Ooh. Gosh, when I was at ESPN, I did a feature piece on Julian Edelman for Sunday NFL Countdown. Wow. So, I went to Foxborough and did an interview with him, but I also got to go to different places and talk with coaches of his along the way and spend some time with his family out in the San Francisco area in California. And, his dad owns a mechanic shop out there and sat and talked to Frank for a while. And it was just really cool to like kind of get to see all sides of where Julian grew up and kind of where he came from. And also just the like desire that has driven him for his entire life, really. His dad was like, he would come into my room when he was in like 8th grade freshman year and he would just cry because he was so small and like he hadn't grown and when am I, and then all of a sudden he grew and obviously things, greatly changed, but he just had this desire that fueled him. And I think you saw that all throughout his career, I mean, even, as he said to me, like when the Patriots called him, when they drafted him, Belichick basically was like, I don't know what we're going to do with you, but we just know you can play football. So we'll figure it out. And so that definitely comes to mind. And then I hosted NFL Live after the Patriots won the Super Bowl when he was the Super Bowl MVP. So, he was like sitting in Florida at Disney World because that's, the trip that they get. And so, chatting with him, kind of going full circle there, I would say that's probably among the tops. But, some of them also are just, there are people that nobody knows. It's not like a name that someone's going to know, but it's the high school coach that is battling cancer but refuses to like give up on his team because he really wants to be there for his players, and he wants to show them like, this is how you fight in life. Like, the things that we talk about on the field are the things that you need to apply to the rest of your life. And that stuff has really stayed with me because coaches are just, they have so much impact on their players, especially when they're at a young age. Like, they're just so moldable and malleable. And when you have a coach like that, that can really make a difference in your life. So some of them, like I said, are people that someone doesn't even know. It's just that their story and their work ethic and their commitment and their respect and their passion, I've seen it fuel their teams and their players, and in turn, it's fueled me as well.
Yeah, just to piggy off of that, how hard is it sometimes? Obviously, being a fan being a fan to a team, and obviously you have to interview one of your favorite players. And how tough is it to move from a fan to be a reporter? Can that be like a tough transition?
I think you just get used to it early on. I mean, you never want to like lose your fandom because it's part of what you love about sports is being able to root for a team. But the reality is that you also want to be able to ask questions and hold players and coaches accountable. And I think, that's done day in and day out by a lot of great people in this industry, whether it be, beat writers who, they call a lot of the people that they cover friends. Like, they have, they develop lifelong friendships. So I think it's just, it's being able to have that mutual respect for one another. And I think that's really what it comes down to, is when athletes respect you as a journalist, and you respect them as an athlete, then you're able to be honest and to do the job that you each need to do to the best of your ability.
Another fan question just popped up. Someone wants to know some of your best moments working on ESPN. Obviously, I'm working with Jay Harris, Tony Collins, Jamie Sear, Josina Anderson. I could go down the list. So they want to know some of your best moments overall.
Yeah, there's so many great people that I worked with at ESPN. Like, I don't even think that I could like start singling people out. It's just, it's like anything in this world. Like, relationships are everything, and people are everything. So when you work with great people, it is such a difference maker. For sure. Like, the morning that I hosted the 9 a.m. Sports Center after the Red Sox won the World Series, like, that was pretty cool for me because, Boston born and bred, and to be able to sit there and be thrilled that I got no sleep and my team had won the World Series is pretty sweet. And obviously, same goes with, hosting NFL Live and having the Patriots come in after they won the Super Bowl. But gosh, I mean, there's just like, being on the Sunday NFL Countdown set with Boomer and that crew of guys was really special for me. Like, that just, I loved that I could get up there and share those stories and contribute to a show that, I grew up watching, right? Like, we all kind of grew up watching that show. So that was really meaningful. And, yeah, I mean, it's just the list goes on for sure.
Yeah. So speaking of Boomer, what was it like working with a Hall of Famer like that? Obviously, he's still going at it big time, but what was it like just being in the same presence as him?
Yeah, I think the thing about Boomer is that, and the other person that I have said this about and would say it about any time is John Saunders, who, you know, is obviously just a legend at ESPN and in the business. And you know, he's a real goat. And same with Boom, obviously. But I think really what jumps out about both of them is just like better person than they even are broadcaster. I mean, honest to goodness, like, you know, they're just the type of John was and Chris Berman is, like, you know, if you pick up the phone and call them, like they're there, like they're ready to help in any way they can, and just like care, you know, like they actually want to make that effort, you know, and like I remember when I lost my job and I was part of the big layoff at ESPN, one of the first phone calls I got was from Chris Berman being like, I feel awful and I can't believe this has happened, and you're super talented and I want you to know, like, if you need anything, like, I'm here, like, call me. And, you know, and we've obviously kept in touch since then, but I just think that, like, that speaks volumes about somebody when, like I said, you know, truly incredible broadcaster, but even better person.
Wow. Yeah. So speaking of, I couldn't believe when ESPN laid off all these people, but you got a new opportunity. In June, you announced that you're going to Sports Spectrum and launching a new podcast with them. And what's that transition been like for you, moving from ESPN, going to Sports Spectrum, and having your own podcast called Transform now?
Yeah, the podcast is a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it. It's been unique for me to be able to bring sports and faith together on that platform and to be able to share those conversations with people. And I am just really fascinated by the topic of transformation and how there are moments in our lives where we're continually transformed, right? Because if you think about life, like, it's a journey and we're all trying to grow throughout it and thus transform throughout the course of our lives. And so to really be able to tap into those conversations with different people, you know, some of whom obviously I've met over the years of working in sports, and then others, you know, whom I've gotten to know since, like John and Catherine Gordon were the last guest that I had on the podcast that dropped last week. And he's a, you know, best-selling author and speaker. And Catherine has her own podcast, and they co-wrote a bestseller together. And, you know, so to be able to share those moments and those stories is really, it's just been something that's on my heart. So it's really special to have the chance to do that. And I've really enjoyed it because it does help me connect in a different way with people that I've known in the sports world for so many years. And, you know, it has a slightly new spin to it. So it's a lot of fun.
Wow. And when do you usually record your podcast?
Gosh, you know, a lot of it, you know how this goes, right? Like, it depends on when someone can do it. And the nice thing about Zoom and this world that we live in is that you don't have to do them in person. It's nice when you can every once in a while, but you don't have to. So really it's kind of all over the map, but, you know, it's oftentimes like on a Monday at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, or, you know, whenever it kind of works for people is when I do it.
So we have another fan question. Someone wants to know, what was it like going over the Sports Center top 10 plays when you were in ESPN?
It was always fun, right? And then, like, the not top was always fun too, because you knew you were going to be cracking up laughing somewhere in that moment. I think, like, the funny thing about the top 10 is, like, some days you're like, gosh, like, we're only at 5 and I'm already watching this. Like, what word am I going to pull out of the dictionary to justify, like, number 2 if I'm already this impressed at number 5? So it's always a fun part of the show. And like I said, you know, you're always wowed, you know, or you're guaranteed to get a good laugh if it's not top.
So how often do you still watch Sports Center top 10?
Yeah, I mean, we watch it some. You know, my kids are huge sports fans, so there's always some type of sport on in my house. Whether it be ESPN or gosh, MLB, NFL, like all of it, it just depends on what's going on which day. But they're huge sports fans. So I don't honestly think that we really watch anything other than sports in my house.
I don't know. I don't know. I just want to bring this up. I don't know if you saw Jay Harris on Sports Center recently. I don't know if you saw that call when where a local team, Jersey Shore Blue Claws, the guy from the Blue Claws, the center fielder made that diving catch. That was number one. We covered that game. We were at that game. We were covering that game, and the next day, yesterday, actually, I got an interview with the center fielder in person. So that's
awesome.
That was crazy being number one for him, especially in a minor league team that's close to us. And for me to be able to interview that same guy on yesterday, it's just amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. And like those stories are so great, right? Like when you have someone that is in your backyard who all of a sudden like makes this amazing catch and then is part of that. So I love that. And I think that's great. What did he say when you talked to him?
Yeah, so yesterday we covered the Blue Claws a lot with our company that I work with, and I asked him about the play yesterday, and he said he was shocked that it was someone was able to find that video and post it on Sports Center, and he said his family was more excited than him.
That's funny. He's probably like, "This is what I got to do."
I'll send you the clip.
Yeah, that's great. I'd love to see it.
So a couple more things. I know you're busy, but before we get to the last two things, I don't know if you heard about obviously since you're a Boston fan, would you like to see the Celtics trade for Kevin Durant?
Oh, that's been a topic of conversation in my house with my son who he'd probably tell you he's a Sixers fan and not a Celtics fan. Although I don't know, my kids are sort of at that age that I feel like they figure out what players they like, and that might ultimately decide which team they're actually fans of. But I like KD. I think it would depend on the trade. I just think like, what I have definitely learned, having been in and around the industry and particularly covering the NFL. And I know you mentioned Mike Tannenbaum earlier, but, working with Mike T on the 33rd team and Joe Banner, obviously, who was the president in Philadelphia, the Eagles for so long, is that you really have to look at trades as a whole and then like what the rest of it really means and where that puts you. And obviously, the NFL and the NBA are different. But there are certainly like team building things that transfer onto both sides. So I think it would depend on the whole picture. How's that?
That's a good way of saying it because Jaylen Brown tweeted today SMH. So gotta see what happens. And
yes.
But what's that one piece of advice would you give to a young girl that are trying to get into the same business as you in the sports industry?
I don't even think it's just for the sports industry. I think it's anything, and I think so much of it is do what you love and be willing to work at it, and that's really it, right? Like, do you love what you're doing? Because if you love it, then it's not going to feel like a job. It's going to feel like something that you want to work at. Yeah. And then recognize that even though you love it, you still have to work at it. Because I think that's just the nature of anything, right? Like anything in life worth having is something that you're going to have to work hard for.
Yeah. So the last two things here, our team is part of this foundation. It's called the Hugh Jackson Foundation. He's a former NFL coach. Now he's coaching at Grambling State University. We're trying to help him prevent human trafficking, making sure the community stays safe. So we'll send you the
great cause.
Yeah, so you can check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. I love that you've partnered with him in that. And that's, something that I think awareness needs to continue to be raised on and people need to know about and be made aware of.
Yeah, thank you. And the last thing here, would you like to say anything to all the nurses, doctors, and all the center workers right now?
Oh gosh, thank you. Thank you 1,000 times over, for everything over the past couple of years that we've been through. And I think, the greatest thing that we can all learn from everything that we've been through is that one, community is so incredibly important, and we need to continue to be there for each other and be there with love for each other and support each other. And we also need to be grateful and show that gratitude and say thank you. So, really from the bottom of my heart, like everybody who has worked so hard over the past couple of years to keep us moving forward in a positive direction. And, that positivity is something that's so important to me, like to be able to send a positive message. And, again, with like my podcast with Transformed, like it's my hope is that it reaches people in a place where they feel like when they're in times of transformation in their own lives, they're like, oh, I heard so-and-so say this. I heard Danny Cannell mention this to Jade, and that really like stayed with me and helped me as I'm going through my own process. So I think, to remember to be positive, to remember to be grateful, and to remember to lead with love, I think is just so important.
Yeah, so Jade, I'll let you close it out. Tell our fans where they can find you on all social media formats, and would you like to plug what's coming up next for you guys?
Sure. So, as you said, I dropped my podcast not that long ago that launched in June. It's called Transformed with Jade McCarthy. You can listen to it whatever you find your podcast. So check that out. It's part of the Sports Spectrum podcast family. So check out our website, sportspectrum.com. You can also check out my website. I'm leaning into doing some speaking as well and sharing some of the stories that I've spent, a career covering. My website's jademccarthy.com. And then across socials, it's at Jade McCarthy. Like to try to keep it nice and simple, right?
Yeah, so there you have it, the one and only Jade McCarthy. Amazing, talented, inspiring sports reporter, broadcaster in the industry. Man, she's killing it. Like I said, she's the GOAT, former ESPN anchor. Man, thank you for joining the show. It's truly an honor. Thank you to our fans for tuning in and asking questions to Jade today. But man, thank you again. Hopefully we can get you back on the show at some point down the line so you can meet the full team. But keep up the amazing work. We're gonna follow you throughout your career. And now good luck with your podcast and Sports Spectrum. And I can't wait to see your next episode. And thank you.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here, and absolutely keep in touch. And I'm sure we'll talk again.
I would definitely, yeah.